past year, our governments have increased cooperation on a whole host of shared priorities, not only security, but economic cooperation, humanitarian assistance, critical infrastructure. We've had trilateral meetings over the past year to include meetings between myself, Ricky, and our Japanese counterpart, the Vice President, President Marcos, and Prime Minister Kishida, National Security Advisor Sullivan and his counterparts, and this week in Tokyo, Deputy Secretary of State Kurt Campbell will be meeting with his counterparts. All of this leading to the summit meeting between President Biden, President Marcos, Prime Minister Kishida at the White House on April 11th, the first trilateral leaders summit with the United States, the Philippines, and Japan. We're constantly expanding this partnership to meet bigger challenges, to seize bigger opportunities, including semiconductors, and you heard the Foreign Secretary reference that. I had a chance today to visit the INQUIRER facility, which is quite remarkable. But if you look at 12% of its GDP, but we want to support Filipino manufacturing, decrease dependencies, strengthen global supply chains. In November, we launched a partnership under the CHIPS and Science Act to explore opportunities to grow and to diversify semiconductor supply chains. During the mission that Secretary Mundo recently conducted, very successfully, this presidential trade mission last week, we announced plans to invest an additional $1 billion in the Filipino tech sector and to double the number of semiconductor factories here in the Philippines. And we're exploring, as you heard, opportunities through the growth and investment, global investment and infrastructure program. Transformative investments in infrastructure that could have a major benefit for the semiconductor industry by addressing barriers to investment, including some of the logistics and energy costs. We're assessing additional priority areas for investment: clean energy, transportation, logistics, warehousing, to increase food security, for example. And it's a partnership, I'll just say in conclusion, that is growing day by day in a variety of other areas as well, from cyberspace to artificial intelligence to clean energy to critical minerals to outer space. We very much appreciate the Philippines joining us in sponsoring a resolution at the United Nations on artificial intelligence, the first standalone resolution on AI focused on deploying AI for the benefit of sustainable development. We now have more than 75 co-sponsors. So it's a long way of saying we've already seen an extraordinary expansion in our partnership these last couple of years, but as the Foreign Secretary said, there's a lot more to do, and I'm very glad to be here to advance that effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Blinken. We'll now commence the question and answer portion with alternating questions from the Philippine side and the foreign media accompanying the U.S. delegation. From the Philippine side, can we entertain the question from Michael Flores of Reuters? Michael, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, Secretaries. This question is for both of you. The White House announced that President Biden will host Prime Minister Kishida and President Marcos next month for the first trilateral summit. What form or shape will this trilateral cooperation take, and how will this be operationalized? Is the conduct of joint patrols in the South China Sea part of the discussion, and is this cooperation aimed at suppressing the rise of China, a word that Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi used to describe when it comes to the U.S.'s actions in the region? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, the scheduled trilateral summit will be held the second week of April in Washington, D.C. And of course, this is the first of its kind. And the main aim we all expect is that the trilateral summit will seek to aim cooperation, more cooperation, especially at the trilateral level. And this will include cooperation to promote economic growth and cooperation in various areas, such as in promoting clean energy. They'll also discuss, we expect, climate cooperation, and of course further peace and security in the Indo-Pacific region, and also around the world. And at the moment, we're also undertaking meetings at other levels, at senior official level, to see how this can also, how these various activities can be operationalized. So the basic aim, essentially, is to reaffirm also our historical ties of friendship, our commitment to shared democratic values and a shared vision for a free and open Indo-Pacific, and how to further promote the prosperity, security, and peace of our peoples and of the region.
Everything that the Foreign Secretary said, which I agree with. These are three countries that have a shared vision for a free and open Indo-Pacific. And I think a recognition that when we work together, when we collaborate, when we pool our resources, including in terms of economic cooperation, building critical infrastructure, humanitarian assistance, we're stronger when we do it together and bring together all the complementarities that we have. So that's really what the summit's about, as well as our work together to uphold international law. Something that all three of our countries feel very strongly about. And in terms of operationalizing it, I'm sure there'll be things coming out of the summit meeting, but this is something the Foreign Secretary and I talked about today to make sure that even as we...
Sorry to move on another region. If I may ask you a question on Niger. The junta asked the United States to pull out its troops. This comes after France was asked to pull out and has pulled out. Were you surprised by that decision? Were you disappointed? And it leaves a huge vacuum. What is your thoughts about that? Thank you very much.
Okay. Want me to start? So with, Leon, thank you. With regard to the Mutual Defense Treaty of a free and open Indo-Pacific, and as is the case with the trilateral work we're doing with the Philippines and Japan, and we just both mentioned a moment ago, there's a very strong affirmative agenda. But again, it's not designed against anyone. It's in service of realizing a common vision for the future to the benefit of peoples in all of our countries. In terms of Niger, we made clear in Niger, including very recently, that we had a number of very real concerns in several areas, and we're troubled by the path that Niger was on. We're in touch, we remain in touch with the CNSP, and we're discussing with them a path forward.
Thank you. Well, I think Secretary Blinken was pretty clear that the Article 4 of the MDT specifically states the conditions under which it would take.
Good afternoon, Secretaries. I know you both mentioned Article 4 of the Mutual Defense Treaty and that it takes an armed attack to activate the said agreement, but we also know for a fact that there's an escalation of tensions in the South China. Fall just a little below the threshold of an armed conflict. Is there a way to adjust to changing tactics, and is there a stronger action that...
Not just from the Philippines, but from a number of other countries. In terms of what we're doing, we're engaged in intense diplomacy, as is the Philippines, so that countries come together, or even individually, to reaffirm international law, to reaffirm the rights that everyone is entitled to. That's important. Second, we have for many years made major investments in the capacity of the Philippines. Those investments continue, both in its maritime capacity, but also more broadly in its economic capacity, because its economic strength and resilience is probably the most important factor in determining its long-term security. And I just described some of the things that we're looking at doing to carry that forward in even more effective ways. So I think the response really has been and continues to be a comprehensive one, so that the Philippines can be in the strongest possible position to affirm its rights, as it has been doing, and properly so.
Yes, in response to your query, I have to repeat that the Philippines has always maintained the policy of addressing any disputes and managing will also help us enhance their security. So I think all of these work together to provide an appropriate way of addressing our security challenges in our region.
Thank you, Secretaries. Tom Bateman, BBC.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, and thank you for hosting us, Mr. Foreign Secretary. Mr. Secretary, if I could start, you've announced this afternoon you're going to travel to the Middle East after being here. That's your 6th trip to the region. There is now a very significant security vacuum in Gaza, which is deepening the catastrophic conditions on the ground for civilians, and especially affecting aid supplies to the north. So I want to ask you, how is this not a harbinger of Gaza's future? We know the US solution is that the Palestinian Authority, reformed, should control Gaza, but Prime Minister Netanyahu has repeatedly rejected this. That position seems integral to the continuity of his government now. So are you able to explain how you will square your position with the Israelis in any other way than Israel having a different Prime Minister? And just to add to that, you made an extremely passionate defense of democracy and the importance of journalism in Seoul yesterday, and the US role in defending that. We know the US is the main military backer of Israel. The Committee for the Protection of Journalists now says at least 95 journalists and media workers have been killed since October 7th, the vast majority in Gaza, among the huge civilian death toll there. At the same time, Israel and Egypt have still not given independent access to Gaza for foreign journalists to add to the work of local colleagues there. So what steps are you taking to address that? And Mr. Foreign Secretary, if I could just ask, we're months away from an election in the US. I wanted to ask about the commitment that you feel, the value of a US commitment these days, when we've had two different administrations with very contrasting approaches to the value of multilateral institutions. What value can be staked in US promises and commitments made to you?
Tom, thank you very much. So with regard to the trip that we'll be taking from here, going on to Saudi Arabia and to Egypt, the purpose is multifold. It's of course to push for an agreement on a ceasefire and the release of hostages. As you know, we're intensely engaged on that every single day, and we're doing everything we can to push that forward and to reach an agreement. But it is also to continue the conversations that we started back in January on exactly the question you raised, which is post-conflict Gaza and the arrangements that will need to be made to provide for its governance, for its security, protection, for lasting regional peace. There too, a lot of work has been ongoing in the last weeks and last months. So that's exactly what we'll be doing there. Beyond that, I can say we've also impressed upon Israel the imperative of having a plan for Gaza for when the conflict ends, which we hope will be as soon as possible, consistent with Israel's needs to defend itself and make sure that October 7th can never happen again. There, as you know, we put out many months ago a number of principles in Tokyo regarding the future of Gaza. We stand by those principles, and the challenge now is to make sure that any plan for the future brings them to light. But that will be very much the focus of this visit. Now, at the same time, as you mentioned, we continue to face a horrific humanitarian situation for children, for women, for men in Gaza. In the first instance, of course, this is something brought about by Hamas, by its actions on October 7th, and by its actions ever since. This could have, as I've said repeatedly, been over many months ago if Hamas had put down its arms, stopped hiding behind civilians, released the hostages, and the world has been relatively silent on that ever since. But, as we've said from day one, it is also absolutely incumbent on Israel, as it acts to defend itself and prevent October 7th from happening again, to make it a priority to protect civilians, those who are caught in harm's way, and to provide for those who desperately need humanitarian assistance. And this is something that we've worked on one way or another virtually every day since. If you look at some of the percent, the totality of the population is in need of humanitarian assistance. Compare that to Sudan, about 80% of the population there is in need of humanitarian assistance. Afghanistan, about 70%. Let me say very quickly, first of all, my own deep admiration and respect for all of your colleagues who put themselves in harm's way to try to bring, those have to be taken into account. But the basic principle of access for journalists is something we stand strongly behind.
Thank you very much, Secretary Blinken and Manalo, for this interaction with.
Right.
Secretary, would like to say something.
If you want to cut me off.
Thank you, sir.
No, just very briefly, I think it was on the value that we attach. Well, I think I couldn't have said it so simply to say that when I said earlier that I think our relationship with the United States has never been higher and greater, and we're both committed to even elevating it further. And this is based on many considerations. But even beyond that, I think our relationship is not only because it's a short-term relationship or anything like that. It's really based on some very enduring interests. First, our commitment to democracy and to also adherence to the rule of law, and the fact that we have a shared vision on the necessity of promoting peace, security, and development in the Indo-Pacific region. And we have a partnership which has lasted not only the 70 years of official democratic relations, but goes back hundreds of years. So I think these are elements which will always be there. And I think this will underpin our relationship in the years ahead.
Thank you very much, Secretary Manalo and Secretary Blinken, for interaction with the press. We thank everybody for joining us in this joint press conference. We wish the U.S. delegation as well as the foreign press accompanying the delegation productive meeting in the Philippines, as well as safe travel back to the United States. Thank you very much and good afternoon to all.
Good